The word is out about the town to lift a glass. Oh, and don't look down. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. What is that?
I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Politics Unplugged, the podcast. And, this week I'm lucky enough to be joined by Tony Cani again, with a Democratic consultant, and making his first appearance here on the podcast. I haven't seen him for a while. I'm very honored to have him back here on the show. Sean Noble. I want to thank you guys very much for being here. And it's good to see you, Sean. It's been a little while.
Here. Yeah. We're going to have you. I don't know if you do other people's podcasts, but we've got Light Beer, Dark Money. We'll have you come on.
Well, you had me at beer.
Cross promotion, little cross promotional work here.
Amazing. You had me at beer.
Yeah. Well, nobody wants to talk about the dark. Well, we had Lori Roberts on. She wanted to talk about dark money.
Yeah, but can we go? Can we go regular beer? Not a big light beer guy.
Sure. Whatever.
But
whatever it takes.
Not the biggest light beer guy, but this week though, I want to focus a lot and talk about the big story this past week, and it's going to be the big story over the next year. And that is the abortion issue. We saw a big case land before the state Supreme Court, and I think it's hard to argue that there's been a bigger case to land before this court in recent years than this one. I mean, the ramifications of this are enormous. Women's choice is on the ballot. It's a very personal issue for people. The political ramifications are massive as well, depending on how this plays out. So I kind of want to dive into this and start with you, Sean. Let's start with you. From what you saw, from what you heard, from what you know, I mean, did you get a sense that the court was leaning one way or another? Because the question right now, real quick, is whether to reinstate an old law that dates back to 1864. It's a near total ban on abortion.
Right.
Except for cases, only exception in case of the life of a mother, or continue on, or continue with the 2022 law that bans abortion after 15 weeks. Which way do you think they were leaning? Could you tell?
Well, I think it's hard to read the tea leaves. One of the things that I've kind of jumped out at me was the question of, well, if they wanted to overturn the territorial law, why didn't they just say that?
Mm-hmm.
That makes me think that some of the justices might be like, we've got to take legislative intent for real. And if that's the case, we could very well have a decision that goes back to territorial. And it's not that they are, that the justices on the Supreme Court are all anti-abortion. It's just that they're going to follow what the law says.
Yeah. And
I think that then, the way that I gain that out of my mind is that comes down, February, March.
No.
And we have the pro-abortion folks who have the ballot initiative that is almost for certain going to qualify for the ballot. So what does Planned Parenthood and the other folks do if the Supreme Court rules on that? Do they just say, hey, look, this is why we need this language? Or do they try to appeal or do something to deal with that? So I think this becomes a little bit more of a sticky wicket than it already is.
Yeah, and they talked about that. I mean, it was the intent of the law, and in that bill, I believe that said in there that that law did nothing to interfere with the old so-called territorial law. What's your sense on this, Tony?
I don't know. The thing I'm really interested in is whether or not the fact that these judicial retention elections aren't normally that big of a deal.
They weren't normally a big deal until a few of them almost got booted off the island last year.
And so that's starting to happen. And if there's any issue that would motivate a group of people to vote not to retain, especially now with the Democratic governor, right? Mm-hmm. Like a governor is pro-abortion rights, I could see people getting, knocked off the bench for the first time. And so I wonder how much that's coming into play. I don't know. I genuinely think that it seems my read of this Supreme Court is that they tend to want to follow the law, right? Like I genuinely think that that's where they are. But I this has to be influencing at least their thinking a little bit. And but if Governor Ducey appointed a large number, I don't even know the number of these justices. He has said that he supports the 15-week. He's one of the guys who said the 15-week ban. So I wonder whether or not that is a reflection of similar beliefs. I don't know. Well, either way, it's going to be giant news. It's going to be giant news, and I think that it is going to be utilized by the people who are pushing for the constitutional rights for abortion rights, no matter what the ruling is. Yeah. It's going to be a springboard no matter what.
Well, it was just really weird to me. I started calling some of the lawmakers. What was your intent, right? It's not like this U.S. Supreme Court is trying to divine what the founders of the country meant with the Constitution. Because unless you believe in Ouija board crap, like you can't get a hold of Thomas Jefferson and say, so when you said right to bear arms and well-regulated militia, like what did you mean? You can actually call these people and they'll tell you what they meant. I mean, I talked to John Kavanaugh and he's like, yeah, we wanted the 1864 law back. That was our intent. And for, Clinton Bullock's case, well, hell, he should have just rolled over and asked his wife. His wife was a co-sponsor on the bill that he's now. Yeah. Side note, he feels he has an ethical obligation to weigh in on this. And that's a whole other discussion. But he doesn't feel like there's any conflict there. But, like, you can actually talk to these folks. My sense, though, is, the common wisdom right now is that if that 1864 law is reinstated, that could be really bad, and the voters could take it out on Republicans next year. Do you buy into that conventional wisdom, Sean, or is there another way to think about this?
I think that, Republicans are at risk. There's just no question about that. I mean, we see that. We've seen that. We saw that in the Virginia elections last month.
Time doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, it's a flat circle. I've heard it described as a flat circle.
Yeah. That there was high expectation for Youngkin to gain the majority in both the House and the Assembly and the Senate. He did not, and the abortion issue was the main reason. So it still has impact, and it will have impact. The question for Arizona legislators and anyone running for office at the state level when this comes up is, in some ways, the Planned Parenthood and others' side have given these guys some cover, because now they can say, this is going to be on the ballot. People are going to decide. We'll follow the will of people. So if you're in a contentious race and someone asks you, hey, this is now out of my hands. This is in your hands. This is why we have initiative process in Arizona. We'll follow the will of the people. So they can take the sting out of it if they message on this correctly. But it's still a challenge for Republicans.
I think the problem with that I think there's two problems with that. One, you'd have to have disciplined Republican candidates in these competitive races, which hasn't been the case, right? There's like maybe one. That's one thing, right? Like, already like the District 17 candidates like Wadsack and Rachel Jones have said that they support a total ban, right? They're out there. They said it. Like Rachel Jones printed a T-shirt of her, saying that she gets abortion rights. But one of the arguments for this amendment is that you don't want the legislature to keep messing around with this issue. You want to just let it get constitutional clarity. And so I think it's going to become an issue where it's like, well, I mean, where do you stand? Because I'll vote no, because it's going to be in your hands. And so I think it's going to be tough for some of them, aside from the discipline bit, to avoid this issue, especially with how rabid the Republican base is, and the fact that the anti-abortion leaders in this state, they support the 1800s one, and so that is going to be a bit of pressure that's going to be hitting most of these candidates. But the smart thing to do would be what Sean said. I just don't know if anything but maybe one of these candidates will say that.
We'll see. I mean, he's right. There's a serious lack of discipline amongst most candidates, Republican or Democrat.
Legislative candidates in general. That's a very good point.
There is, and it can even go to a higher level. The one thing that is interesting is that the MAGA base, the Trumpian base, is actually not necessarily 100% pro-life.
Okay.
Because he's drawing from people who are not traditionally in the Republican realm. The blue collar workers, middle income, lower income, uneducated, not college educated. And so there's, I don't think Trump is personally necessarily pro-life.
Wasn't he pro-choice before he was pro-life?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was pro-choice before he said that you should criminalize abortion and put women who have abortions in prison.
Yeah.
So yeah, before he also was a Clinton person before.
Right.
So I mean,
the guy,
right.
I mean, it's there's no guide star, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's no lodestar in the philosophy of Donald Trump, and that's also true of the people who are totally sycophant followers of his.
No.
There is no lodestar. So as you saw in Ohio, very conservative state, huge Trump support, and they roundly rejected the pro-life position.
Ohio, Kansas,
Yeah.
Iowa. I mean, for years it's always been a kind of a moot court argument.
Right.
Like, Republicans, you handle a lot of Republicans, and you probably advise a lot of Republicans. Like, when you go talk to these folks out on the stomp, like, you're profoundly against abortion. So you want to outlaw it because there were no consequences for saying that.
It's just so easy to say.
Yeah, and there were no consequences because you weren't voting on it
Right.
because it was constitutionally protected. But now, when you go into into the voting booth, either literally or figuratively is on the ballot now.
Right.
And I think it's a lot different. And I think
on top of that too, like the theoreticals, the hypotheticals, I'm sorry, that people would argue, or that's never going to happen. We're seeing in the news that they are happening, right? Like in Texas, there's that woman who, she needed an emergency abortion and they wouldn't grant it her. She had to go out of state. Like that was gigantic national news. And one of the things that happens is people are like, voters don't pay attention this early. But when things do break through, like that breaks through,
it definitely breaks
it gets locked in.
Yeah.
It gets locked in. And so I think this is just a devastating issue for Republicans. I think they just went too far.
And I think there's some thought, too, that, if the core could end up taking some wind out of the sails for the ballot initiative if they sided with the 15-week ban. Because most abortions happen in Arizona before 16 weeks. I think 93% before 15 or 16 weeks could take some wind out of the sails. Mm-hmm. However, kind of going along this thing about this doesn't happen or won't happen much, that 15-week ban also does not carve out any exceptions for rape and incest. And I've heard some Republicans say, well, it doesn't happen that much. But where it does happen, it's freaking tragic.
Yeah.
It's gut-wrenching.
I mean, you look at Kentucky, the Kentucky governor's race, totally hinged on the fact that he had this woman who was raped by her stepfather and impregnated. And, when she was 12 years old and said, if this guy's the governor, I'm out of luck. And that's
the thing about this. That's the thing about this issue is we're talking the politics of it, but this is just a regular life issue. This is just
it's a real life
issue that everybody has an opinion on. Yeah. People are impacted by this. And so I just think that there's not a lot of wiggle room on this. There's not a lot of messaging.
We're talking about some of the more personal stuff, and just have to acknowledge, okay, three guys in a room talking about this,
right?
And the focus of this is going to be on the politics of and what we saw in court and all that stuff. But some of this stuff is such a personal choice, and we don't know because we're three guys in a room what that is like for a woman to feel what they feel when people are proposing legislation like this. So that just should be acknowledged.
Well, and what's fascinating for me, and this is one of the complaints that I've had, is that even with the Alito leak, we knew months before the Supreme Court decision came that it was coming. Even with the heads up, the pro-life movement was completely flat-footed, caught flat-footed by the decision, and went from 50 years of saying this is a state issue to immediately pivoting, oh, we have to have a national law.
And
It's like,
the court
that doesn't make any sense.
And the ballot initiatives have
Yeah.
have triggered that too. Like Senator Vance, as soon as the Ohio thing said, he's like, yo, we need a national law. And so you've got moderate Republicans like Cani who have argued this is a state law, this is a state issue. One, it's going to be on the ballot.
For 50 years it was argued that
Yeah.
you should leave it up. Republicans.
They immediately shifted.
Yeah. It's amazing to me.
Astounding.
Well, I think that like the sort of like elites that are behind that really, really want this ban, I don't know if they care too much about the electoral consequences of it. I think
That's true.
And
That
so
they are the true believers are philosophically pure, and they don't care about politicians. They care about the policy. What they fail to understand is that the policy comes from the politicians. So
Yeah.
you can hold politicians to a standard that's unattainable and never see your policy in place.
All right. Well, I do want to pivot now, and I want to talk specifically about a big primary race next year in the West Valley. We've talked a little bit about this podcast, but I just, got through interviewing Debbie Lesko, Congresswoman from District 8. She's announced that she will not be seeking re-election. I also interviewed the candidate that she's endorsed, Ben Toma, and I want to ask you, first of all, Sean, how do you see that race playing out, just in general? Because that is a crowded primary. You've got Donald Trump jumping in. He's already endorsed Abe Hamadeh in this race. Debbie Lesko has endorsed Ben Toma, who is the current Speaker of the House. How do you see what do you see playing there? And, Blake Masters, another high-profile name. He's in that race. And
Well, don't forget Trent Franks.
don't forget. How can you forget Trent Franks?
So this one's interesting. Blake Masters clearly has the best name ID.
Yeah.
He ran a statewide Senate race. Hamadeh, the president's endorsement in this race, I think, is not as important as in other races.
Interesting.
And it's because you've got the MAGA lane is very filled up. You've got Blake Masters, you've got Abe, you've got Anthony Kern.
Oh, who can forget Anthony Kern?
Kern. And then, Trent Franks is going to try to wedge himself into that lane. I'm a true conservative, that kind of thing. Toma probably is every bit as conservative as those guys, but he's not viewed as that conservative for some reason. And I think it's in part he's the Speaker of the Arizona House, and he's done a very good job. I mean, the guy is responsible for ESAs and a flat tax. So he's got real bona fides to run on as far as someone who's actually done something. Whereas Hamadeh can't say that. Blake Masters can't say that.
wait a minute, Hamadeh, he was a prosecutor for like 6 weeks.
Well, if he's got the
I'm sensing some sarcasm from you there on that, Tony.
So the way I look at it is Blake will be viewed as the 800-pound gorilla because he's got the most name ID. And in these kind of races where I don't know whether I don't know who's going to raise the most money. I don't know how much money is going to come in from the outside for various candidates. Money will matter, but if you don't have heavy spending by others, then that gives Blake a little bit of an advantage because of his name ID.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, too, is I asked Toma about election fraud, and I felt, maybe he disagrees, that I felt I didn't get a straightforward answer on whether he thinks that election fraud was overturning or rigging elections and whatnot. Are you surprised that someone like Ben Toma would have trouble answering that question?
I stopped being surprised by this a couple of years ago. I just stopped because the biggest issue is that like you have the Freedom Caucus types, which is a small number of Republicans, more in Arizona than in other states in the legislature or in Congress, and there are Republicans who disagree with them, who I know because they'll tell me, they'll talk about it with their family, but they are terrified of taking a stand against them, absolutely terrified. And so the math, it seems like just saying, hey, you know what? We got to turn the page. We need to move on. Look at what's happening. And I'm writing Republican talking points. And you think that would work and then pivot to the real accomplishments, the conservative accomplishments of Toma. But, this, I think, is going to keep happening. And what's going to happen as the Freedom Caucus that controls the Republican House of Representatives starts pushing more of this kind of stuff, where's Toma going to stand? Is he going to, do what the former speaker did and, basically knock this stuff out? Or is he going to let it go all the way up to the governor? Like, this is going to play out in the legislative session. And it's, I think he's in kind of a tough spot. The thing I'm curious about is Anthony Kern is 100% a Trump guy. He was there on January 6th. He participated in all the Stop This Steal, the
he was an
fraud
elector?
sham, all this stuff. He was one of these false electors.
He's at risk.
Actually, yeah.
And is he? How much does he think the Trump endorsement matters? If I'm Abe, I'm on the phone. I'm like, hey man, you should drop. You should go back and you should run for the House like you were planning on running for the state House again. Oh. And just to sort of see, because I think the with him gone, the more Abe can get these guys to drop out, the better chance he has of winning. So I'm curious to see if that plays out. I don't know. They've all blocked me on Twitter, so I can't tell.
well, Sean, Sean, talk talk to us a little bit. As the resident Republican student of Republican politics here at the table, take us a little bit into the mindset of like the primary voter or the candidates in there. How come they just still cannot just straightforward say, so and so won the election outright. There was no fraud that overturned these big races. Why can't they just say that?
I think we struck on it. It's fear because I think they overestimate the number of Republican primary voters who actually care very much about that. Mm-hmm. The voters who care the most about that are going to probably vote for the Trump endorsed candidate, so they're going to vote for Abe
if they vote in the primary.
Yeah.
And
that's a good question. That's a good point. There are a lot of people who are so distraught about the election fraud that they're not voting anymore because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, true.
True. It's like literally they've talked themselves out of the process.
Which is about as logical of a way of thought you can get when you're in that lane when you're.
It is astounding. So the calculation, and so it'll be very interesting to see how Blake Masters, because he's the one who's actually the one I'm going to watch on how he handles this issue, because he wasn't an election denier. Then he leaned in hard at the very beginning of the Senate race in an attempt to get the endorsement, which he got for Trump in the primary for the Senate last time.
He acknowledged losing at the end of the day, Blake Masters.
Yes, and so it will be interesting to see whether he leans in on that or if he says, you know what, I've got enough name ID. I'm gonna cede those people to Abe. I'm gonna be the mainstream candidate and, try to run up the middle. If he does that, then that makes it harder for Toma. If he leans in on the Trump stuff, then that opens the lane for Toma even more.
All right. Well, I think we're about out of time here, so let's end up. We're in the holiday season. I want to go, just ask you guys what's your least favorite holiday, Christmas song that you can't avoid hearing, and every time it comes on, you're just like, God, get me out of here.
My least favorite Christmas song.
Because I'll go first. It's Paul McCartney's Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas. I cannot stand that song at all. It needs to go away.
I think you just
it's a huge, it's a big discussion in my house because my wife likes it a lot. Yeah, maybe it's just like a nostalgia thing. I don't know. It's terrible.
I can tell you my favorite.
No.
Last Christmas.
Okay.
Either version. There's a number of versions, but the two big ones are obviously George Michael Wham, or the Taylor Swift version.
Okay.
What you should do after this podcast and the segment when you guys are talking afterwards, just pull out the lyrics of his song and explain the McCartney one and explain what it means. Explain what it means.
Having a wonderful Christmas time. It's simple.
Wow, I'm really emotional about this.
It's simple. But seriously, that song. We got to wrap up here, but that song is like an idea of a song.
Yeah, right.
Like he's just like he wrote a
songwriter in history.
He wrote a chorus. He's like, screw it, I'm Paul McCartney. We'll put this out as a full song. Why? Because I'm Paul McCartney. And I'll still sell 1 billion records.
Exactly.
Yeah, I watched the documentary of it. You know, this guy's a genius, right? He can make up the song. So that's the thing that makes me so mad. I don't know. I'm sure my mom will get mad when she hears this. She likes it too.
Well, hey, I want to thank you guys for both showing up here. It's good to see you again, Sean. Good to see you as always, Tony. And we'll be coming back here in a second with Colin. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. I'm joined now by Colin, my great producer extraordinaire. Thanks for sticking around here. And I feel like at this point, between the TV shows, our discussion there, everything that's been said about this week has already been said. It's just not been said by everybody. It's an old Mo Udall quote, by the way.
Yeah. You want a fourth white guy to talk about abortion? Middle-aged white guy to talk about abortion?
I know. And just a little explanation on that. Sometimes we're limited on on the guests we can, and we make every effort that we can to try to get some diversity, particularly on the issue of abortion. You really want to have a woman weighing in on the discussion, and sometimes it just works out that way that it doesn't. So anybody who is upset about that or wants to criticize, I understand the criticism, but just understand sometimes we are limited on that. So. My apologies for not making that happen. We did try.
Yes.
So, but that being said, I just, it's the end of a long, grueling few weeks. We've been just constantly go. We're getting close to the Christmas. I don't know if there's anything politically. I just feel like the need that we need to follow up on this podcast. So I just kind of want to jump into, and give everybody a treat. I'd like for Colin to kind of, piggyback on the end of the last discussion there, and maybe give us part of his dramatic reading of Paul McCartney's "Having a Wonderful Christmas Time," because he was doing this in between. And it's just it's really wonderful to hear this.
And I heard you guys bagging on the genius of Paul McCartney, and I was shocked.
But you're not a fan of this song either, are you?
It's god awful. It's just terrible. No, I swear it took longer to record it than it took to write it. And assuming it's a one take, it's like he just made it up as he went through. The mood is right. The spirit's up. We're here tonight, and that's enough. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. The party's on, the feeling's here. That only comes this time of year. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time.
Oh my God.
Now, the bridge. The choir of children sing their song. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong ding. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Do-do, 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 do. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. We're simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Here's where a little bit of drama gets thrown in. The word is out about the town to lift a glass. Oh, and don't look down.
What does that mean?
I have no idea.
What does that mean?
I have no idea, but it rhymes with town.
Lift a glass, but don't look down.
It rhymes with town.
Well, to your point, he's making it up on the fly.
Oh, yeah. Watch out for clowns. I mean, he could have gone any number of directions.
Well, I like that. Lift a glass, watch out for clowns.
Yeah.
I think that might have been a little bit better of an interpretation.
It goes on with variations of that. It's terrible.
Oh, good God.
So where do you stand? So the other big Beatle Christmas song is Lennon's Merry Christmas War, or Happy Christmas War is Over. I mean, it's better than this. We'll give it that. It's better than this. Are you a fan?
No, I don't think so. I'm just not a fan of Christmas music in general. So everything kind of starts off with, It's why, like, when we were talking about, like, favorite Christmas songs, like, why I think we all, like, you and I agree, like, the Pogues, Fairy Tale in New York is the best because it starts off with him in the drunk tank. You know, it's not exactly the most Christmassy kind of thing.
Yeah, non-Christmassy is usually good for a Christmas song.
Yeah, the more non-Christmas you can go on a Christmas song, the more chance I'm going to like it at least.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So sticking with the theme of Christmas, and thank you for that wonderful dramatic reading.
It's my pleasure. I mean, to be fair, I think it was better than the song.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Actually, if I was a better editor, maybe I might take your dramatic reading and put it to the music.
Yeah.
I think sell a copy or two.
Yeah, we might.
You know. But like I said, like we'll keep this short. You know, it's been just a really long few weeks and whatnot. I wanted to just talk about Christmas presents.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit yesterday. If you had any thoughts on, like, you know, sharing what your favorite Christmas present of all time was, or as a kid, and what was your worst present of all time?
I've been struggling a little with the best. I'm going to go with, remember when you were a kid and the big wheel was a big thing, the like big plastic tricycle thing?
Did you have a green machine?
No, I had a cheetah.
Oh.
And the cheetah was like the sports car, almost dragster version of that. It was longer, and you were like much more laid down and looking cool. And instead of having to pedal, you could just put your feet forward and it would make it go.
That's rad.
It was cool. The downside being, I lived on a hill when I was a kid with no sidewalks or anything. So we had a long driveway. So my cheetah riding would be down the driveway, and then it didn't really have the greatest turning radius. It'd be like get up and turn and go back down the driveway. But it still looked really cool.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, I'm from the era of the green machine, man.
Yeah.
I never had one, but man, did I covet those, man. The kid that had the green machine, like,
yeah.
I was
you were dealing with a player.
Yeah, he was a player, man. Guy was balling.
Yes.
Before we knew what balling was, like, he was doing that in his green machine.
Yeah.
For me, when I was a kid, man, I got to tell you, my favorite gift of all time, I toy was the $6 million man, Lee Majors. He was just like this action figure, and he had a little, like, he could look through the back of his head, and he had a little magnifying glass, but everything was really small.
Yeah.
And he had the red sweatsuit.
Yeah.
You know, and whatnot. And I remember, like, seeing that under the tree, and it came with like a rocket, I think, or something.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah, because Steve Austin was, if I remember right, the origin story of was it $6 million or $1 million? $6 million man. Yeah. The $6 million man was that he was an astronaut, right?
Yeah.
And he like blew up,
and they pieced him back together with some parts.
They had the technology to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Precursor to RoboCop. Did you actually have to make the noise yourself though?
You had to make that noise. You had to make that noise. But like, it was the perfect. It was great. I had so much fun with that. Like, you know, and like I played with that thing so much. Like the clothing, the sweatsuit got wore out. Like with the holes. It was just super fun times. But I think I shared the story with you about my worst gift, and this is gonna make me sound like such an entitled little brat.
No, I think people will relate.
Oh God, it's gonna. Oh man, talk about first world problems. When I was about 12, was in Germany, and my mom's from Germany. She's an immigrant, and we would go back very often as we could. And we were back there for a winter one time, and one of my mom's friends had bought my twin sister and I like these matching like ski outfits. They were like onesies, which is god awful, loud colors, just ridiculous looking.
Yeah.
And my mom made me wear that every time her friend came around, and her friend, at least in my mind, came around all the freaking time. So, like, you know, I was like, you know, this kid from Midwest Iowa, like, I liked my jeans and my T-shirt, and when I'm not, like, you know, at work, I still do.
Yeah.
That was just awful. And to make it worse, I was dressed just like my twin sister.
Yeah, not good.
No, she didn't enjoy it either.
At least you could rock them on the ski slopes of Iowa.
Well, that's the thing. We didn't go skiing.
Yeah.
We didn't go skiing. We didn't know how to ski.
Yeah.
Like what? Like what? It was terrible.
Were they identical?
Yes. Me and my sister and I,
Yeah.
Like, I
The
love
idea
my
of you as the twins that dressed the same.
Oh God, it was just god awful.
Kind of amazing.
Yeah, it just got awful. I mean, worst case all time. My mom one time made me wear lederhosen when my Oma visited, and that was grueling and brutal and whatnot. But that was over a summer, and that was not Christmas time.
And at least they can be kind of comfortable.
Yeah.
I worked at Disneyland when I was a teenager and had to wear lederhosen and quite enjoyed it.
And
It was one of the few outfits where you got to wear shorts there.
And talk about a real bummer. We had a conversation with a fellow coworker in here who grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. His family didn't have a lot of money. And we asked him, hey man, what was your worst Christmas present ever? He's like, I don't know. Some years we didn't have presents. I was like, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for keeping it real.
Yeah. And on that note, my worst Christmas present, it was a kaleidoscope.
Huh?
A very fancy kaleidoscope. It was like brass, I think.
Okay.
Had a very elaborate case that held it. I was like 45 when I got it.
Was that a gift from your kids?
No, it was from my father-in-law, who in his later years, he would
Just bought random things for people?
Yeah, well, he would pick one catalog, and all of his Christmas presents for everyone came out of that catalog.
Oh boy!
So yeah, so I got a kaleidoscope. One year I got a car radio, and he asked me if I'd put it in my car, and I had to explain. No, it was a ceramic radio that kind of looked like the dashboard of a car. It didn't actually go in the
Sounds
car.
like one of those catalogs you got from remember the cigarette people that would pass out all this free swag?
Yes.
Here's here's the Marlboro Christmas catalog.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a kaleidoscope in here.
Yeah, no, this was like, how every senior tends to get like a giant pile of catalogs in the mail, and it'd be like on the good end the Smithsonian, and on the lower end all kinds of other crap and a lot of museums and stuff.
All right.
So yeah, when I was in my 40s, I didn't have a whole lot of use for a kaleidoscope.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up there. We've got a podcast that was pre-recorded that's going to air next week.
Yes, next week we'll have that,
and that's a fun one.
It's a very fun one. The look ahead to 2024, the headlines of 2024.
Yep.
And a memorial for the musicians we lost in 2023.
That's a fun podcast. That's
Yes.
already been taped. So this is our last one for the year, new one for the year that airs today that we're doing today.
I think that one probably drops Christmas Eve, and then we're off for a week, and then we'll be back at the start of January.
So again, signing off here for this, I do want to wish everybody happy holiday season.
Yes.
However you celebrate, hopefully you're having a great time and not getting into too much trouble, but just enough trouble to make it fun.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.